Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations Podcast. We've made it. It's episode 50 of Iblis Manifestations. And you know what? I'm grateful that we've been able to prolong this as far as we have. And I hope that what the podcast has offered to you guys thus far has been worth it. And of course, I do very much appreciate your support for Iblis Manifestations. So, with this being a very special occasion, I figured who better to have featured on this episode than basically the very first guest that I had featured on the Iblis Manifestations podcast. And that, of course, is my very good friend Darko from Anabolic Outlaw Coaching as well as Legionware. This is a conversation that I have to say is very unfiltered, is very honest, and I think that this will be one that for a lot of those who perhaps sit on the extreme end of certain political ideologies or certain mainstream trends, it's possible that you may have your feelings hurt listening to this one. However, if you are a fan of nuanced conversations and not taking on wholesale ideologies and not so much picking teams and rather trying to dig deep into the gray area of things in life and the world surrounding us, then this is just the podcast for you. So, coming shortly will be my conversation with Darko. We talked about a lot of different things, a lot of modern things actually, modern trends. Of course, we touched upon the failure of mass media as a whole, and certain traces of totalitarianism, which our world has been suffering from, particularly within the last few years, although everything has been building up to that. So yeah, we went there, and in addition to round things off, we also talked about just training, bodybuilding, gym, as that's a very strong common interest between both myself and Darko, and yeah, we got into all of the good stuff, which I'm sure you guys will enjoy. So, if you are new to the Iblis Manifestations podcast, first of all, welcome. I think that based on this introduction so far, you probably already have a good idea of what it is that we do cover on this podcast. So, if you do enjoy this type of nuanced conversations and perspectives from people who you would normally not really see within a mainstream setting, then of course please feel free to subscribe to the channel and take a listen to what we have had to offer thus far. I very much enjoyed my first conversation with Darko, which was released back in, I believe, either late March or early April of 2022, so just about over a year ago from now. And yeah, so I'm going to leave you with this one now. Just one more time, thank you all very much for tuning in, and be sure to support some of Darko's work as well. All of the links will be in the description. So now, ladies and gentlemen, for the second time on Iblis Manifestations, please welcome Coach Darko. Darko, how's it going, man? Welcome back to Iblis Manifestations. This is a first, actually, to have anyone coming back on the show, and who better than the very first guest that I've actually had on the podcast? How are you doing?
Thank you for having me back on the show, and it's actually pretty good. The first podcast that we ever did was one of the ones that I enjoyed more than the others, but it's pretty good. As I mentioned, I just finished like a workout a couple of hours ago. Currently in deload week, so enjoying all of the benefits of that and having the latest cup of coffee that I had in probably months. But yeah, so far so good.
Awesome, man. And obviously, I've got to commend the very good taste in shirt that you've got over there as well. Yeah.
This wasn't sponsored, but it should have been.
Oh, I see. I see. This was the pitch for the
uh,
sponsorship. Now I get it. Yeah,
I want my cut.
absolutely. Well, I think we can work that both ways since I'm wearing your material as well, right?
As you can see, this is like a gathering of gentlemen of superior taste. So it's all
Absolutely.
good.
Fuck yeah, man. Strength and all that good stuff, pretty much. So fantastic. It's good to have you back on, man. I was just thinking. I was trying to think of, what would be the best thing to talk about on the podcast, and obviously with you and I, we already speak quite a bit outside of the this kind of online setting, anyway. But I was just
Yeah.
thinking to myself, since we did the first episode, it's one of them. You kind of reflect back on life and you think about things, and you come to the conclusion that the more things change, the more things stay the same, and
Yep.
and it feels to me like, obviously, like there's been improvements and things like that, but like if you look at like the state of the world in general, it just seems like it doesn't feel like much has changed since I guess it was last April when we last spoke. I mean,
Yep. Yep.
I don't know how have things been like in your world since that time, just as a start off point, really.
I don't know. It's kind of weird. I guess it is at a certain point you get adapted to everything that's going on and you stop worrying about it and focusing on it too much because that can obviously be detrimental. But it's kind of weird because regarding certain subjects which we shall not cover, the truth is coming out, and it's kind of honestly, all things considered, when I look at it, it's almost seems, and this is also something that I think a lot of I also think a lot of people feel this way, but kind of last year, the year before that, and maybe the year prior, it almost felt like surreal, like how should I say, a warp in time where just weird things happened. Some people define that a little bit more metaphysically, but it definitely felt like we entered and ushered the new era. And I kind of, as you mentioned, I don't think it's ever gonna go back. I think Pandora's box is opened, and what we have experienced in the past couple of years is might have now went down in frequency and maybe intensity, but as any spike and as anything, you look at it from micro and macro perspective, it's bound to come back. So it's kind of just how it is. You just ride all these waves.
No, you know what? That is so true, man. The trajectory very much remains the same thing.
Mm,
I
mm,
mean, we can go really fucking deep down a rabbit hole if you want, but for me,
yeah.
um, it seems very much like people are split into two groups now. Like there's this weird, almost Armageddon-like situation that is slowly like building up within humanity itself. Where there's
Mhm,
the
mhm, mhm.
obviously it's the majority, the 60, 70, 80% that seem to just buy in whatever they're fed, and then there's the rest that seem to at least have some hesitation or think about it. And it seems
Yeah,
to me
yeah,
that any kind of questioning, any kind of hesitation, it automatically means that, oh yeah, you're anti-science, you're a Nazi, or you're this and that, and on all of those things as well have completely lost their weight and meaning as well, within this context. So yeah, that's definitely a strange thing. It's actually funny, for whatever reason. One thing I actually wanted to talk to you about was people's now lack of trust in media,
mhm, mhm.
particularly like major media outlets. There seems to be that there are still those who will just look at an article and a headline and then just get fucking triggered, and then that's, that describes their whole mood for the day, and then they're
Yeah.
hell bent on the agenda that's been pushed down their throats. But I think a lot of people are slowly just coming around to the fact that, oh yeah, so maybe these people are full of shit, and you get the likes of what happened with CNN and Joe Rogan last year, which was super obvious. But then we have people even that perhaps might be a little bit closer to our own circles. Like, for example, did you see that fucking Vice documentary that they made about Operation Werewolf and Paul
Of
Wagner?
course.
That was fucking
And
hilarious.
I might be or might not be visible in one frame, but let's just
All right,
leave that.
okay. Yeah. What
But
what
yeah,
did they call that? They called it something like it was a really ridiculous title, like far right group sacrificing animals or something along those lines. Like they tried to go as far as they could with it,
yeah,
really.
yeah. It's kind of like, first of all, I think I like to, when these things are discussed, I like to view them from like a, as I mentioned, from like a macro perspective, and kind of see how all the wheels are turning. Because once you understand the mechanisms of motion, things just naturally start making sense. So one
Mm.
of the things, and this is something that I discussed on and kind of I touched on in this idea, that lately I think that we have, I should say, I think meaning and context are starting to, how should I say, they're pushed on the boundaries of importance. Meaning, if I say something, it doesn't matter what I mean when I say it. It matters the words which I use. It doesn't matter, again, in which all of the power is devoted to the words without actually you understanding what they mean. It's kind of like a dumbing down of society where all of the emphasis is really placed on that. So, and you can see this, you can see this from like multiple different angles. But like, people are have, we can go over, there are like these like multiple examples, even like with Kanye West and whatever, like calling him a Nazi because of some of his like uh, Kanye West claims. But I mean, these things automatically anymore don't have any more meaning. I mean, we had situations where, I mean, CNN recently, and I was informed because of my clients from the US, where they literally labeled a guy who is, as far as I understand, Mexican, like a white supremacist, who started shooting
That's right.
people randomly. Yeah, I mean, these things which absolutely make zero sense anymore, and where words utilized are the only things which are important, are now kind of the default things we should focus on, which is absolutely insane. And I think it's far more, how should I say, uh, far more problematic than people make it up to be. It isn't, the issue isn't in CNN calling a Mexican dude a white supremacist or whatever. The issue isn't calling like a black guy a white supremacist, no matter how absurd that might be. The issue is that by stripping down the meaning of words and their actual connotations, we get to instill our own meaning of them, and that's oftentimes
Mm.
very vague. So for instance, if we go kind of in a different tangent and we touch on this like corporate talk and like big tech, in the sense of like censorship and everything like that, if anyone has ever read the terms of service of most of these companies, it can literally mean everything and
Yeah.
anything. So Instagram, for instance, can ban you for absolutely anything, under a pretext of going against the community guidelines. And one of the examples of going against the community guidelines is not being advertiser friendly, or being sharing harmful or hateful messages. So now that's obviously like what defines harmful or hateful. Similarly, when I was younger, a Nazi or a racist was someone who hated someone based on the racial background, or if you're a National Socialist, you hated someone because they were Jewish.
Mm.
But now, and I've seen this with very weird examples, where being a white supremacist is like a laundry list of items, and if you tick one of these things off, you're a white supremacist. So, for instance, uh, like our good friend, our good friend Kyle from Nightbringer, who
Yeah.
I consider a good friend. Like, he was labeled a Nazi because he was next to a couple of people that he took a photo from, which they probably asked him to take a photo from, and one guy was wearing a black sun patch. That's how little it takes for you. Like you can, like every time now when you
Yeah,
take a photo with someone, you have to be like, okay, let me just see what you're wearing. Oh, what do you mean by that? Oh, what do you mean by that? Like it's so absurd because, and here is a problematic thing. Uh, it gives, if when you let go of these people and let them do whatever they want to do, they have the power to label you however they want to. And kind of, if we want to go back to get back to Paul, one of the greatest things that he said, it was that you're going to be branded whatever you do, so you might as well brand yourself and not let others do that in your name. So for instance, I understand, and I was kind of like this when I was younger, in the sense of like, I didn't care what people said. Like, oh, I know what I am, I know what the people who are close to me, I know what they think of me, etc. But at the end of the day, that really has proven to be a terrible tactic, because you inevitably give all the power to these people who have anything but good intentions for you. And when we go back to the Operation Werewolf thing, as someone who was a part of that entire scene, who was not like online but like physically, I can tell you for a fact that there were non-whites in Operation Werewolf. Like there were guys who were Jewish, there were guys who had African ancestry. There were I one of my clients was also involved in that. He had like from like Micronesia, like his father was from Micronesia. You can see from a fact that and we're not talking about like crypto non-whites where they look like completely white. No. These guys were legitimately non-white. So how can there be a Nazi organization if we have Jews in our ranks, if we have non-whites in our ranks, and even more importantly, because again, I can tell you this for a fact, let's just say people who wanted to shift all of that in a more political leaning, how can I say this? Their treatment physically wasn't something you would want to happen to you, because we didn't want to get that shifted in their direction, because we didn't want culture vultures to come and infest our own ideas and turn it into whatever they think. So it's kind of, again, to go back to the original point, I think it's a very important idea that words start having their original meaning and context starts becoming important, because once we strip down the importance of meaning, we get into a very, very dark precedent where anything can mean absolutely anything, and where you're subject to the will of the mob.
I mean, the thing with that is, like you said, it's almost laughable with some things, like what you mentioned about Kyle in particular. I mean, like another thing that they pulled on him was the fact that on Twitter they were saying something like, "Oh yeah, he likes Jordan Peterson." It's like, "Oh, I didn't know that's something."
I guess I'm a Nazi.
Yeah. I mean, that guy only just went and did a whole thing with Netanyahu, so I really don't understand the
Again,
sense behind that. But the thing is that, you can sort of just laugh it off, like you said, and it's so absurd that it should be funny. But the problem is a lot of people take this seriously, and especially if you're a public figure of some type, like you said, then that becomes a problem, because then it gets so mixed up that people assume that's actually your message. So then you might even get people who'll come up to you and then say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Nazi. Fuck yeah, go you." And it's like, wait, hold on a minute. Like, I never said anything like this. So it's this really strange thing. But like, for example, like just talking about words losing their meaning. I saw an article, which is like, we can get into that. It's interesting enough. But talking about how, because obviously that like the unvaxxed people, obviously myself included.
you mean? I'm sorry. You mean the purebloods?
Purebloods, exactly. So they were saying, like,
The
I mean,
untainted.
yeah, I think it's kind of a childish thing to say, but I do get it. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't refer to myself as that. I don't think.
I would.
Maybe
I would.
as a
I'd put it in my bio, like pure blood, unvaxxed, untainted.
There you go. Okay, tell you what, I might follow suit. But the thing is, it's a funny thing, right? Like I look at that and I think, okay, yeah, it's kind of funny, maybe a little immature, because there were many people who obviously didn't want to do it, and I'm always sort of like, I don't want to make people feel shitty about their choices. I'm focused on people learning if they have made shitty
Yeah.
choices. That's my viewpoint.
Yeah.
I don't want to make people feel shitty about who they are, because most people who did it, they just wanted to do the right thing anyway. Um, but the way I look at it is, they made this article about this, and they literally use these words, saying that, oh yeah, well, if you identify as this sounds a lot like a Nazi. So if you call yourself a pureblood, you may as well go and be a Nazi. And I was like they use the actual word in the article, and it's this main. I can't remember if it was the Independent or maybe Telegraph. I might be fucking that up, but it was a very major outlet that was saying this, and I was like, well, fucking, like like you said, it's that
It's
whole
actually
laundry list basically that's just completely lost all kinds of meaning, really, which is bizarre to me, because on the one hand, the more you push this, the more you're actually allowing genuine extremism to then enter into the stream, and you're normalizing that further.
yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because and people can check this out themselves, but uh I mean, I think you even saw this, that like, objectively speaking, my biggest critics have been legitimate Nazis, and people can see that on my Telegram, because they see the exterior, they see like, okay, there is like this white guy, and he's like jacked, and he's like tattoos, and maybe he likes a few things that we do, therefore he must be on our side, especially because the guys who hate us also hate him. Therefore, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Oh, slow down, cowboy. We
Yeah.
aren't on the same team. We aren't on the same team, and that's something that is unfortunate, because again, you get shifted with these people who you have nothing in common with. There is a very shallow and very surface level appreciation of them for what you do, but then when you actually kind of get into the nitty gritty, you understand that you have nothing in common. I mean, one of the things that I went over for these, like, and this is like this entire tirade, because at a certain point I like tolerated it. Like, I'm not tolerating in the sense, but like I ignored it. Like when they would comment on my stuff, like
Yeah.
yada yada yada, the Jews, yada yada yada, non-whites. It's like, motherfucker. Like, and then you actually go and discuss it with these people, and you understand they're just a carbon copy, but like in a different direction of the people they're against. Their arguments are absolutely
Yeah.
fucking silly. They have zero background, and the funniest thing is they want to educate me on how I am wrong. It's like, and one of the easiest things that you can do is just, what is your reference? What book? Like, what book did you read? Like, no, you didn't read a book. You read a green text of 4chan. You read this and that, and you think now you know everything. And then all of a sudden, when you actually give it to them, they have nothing to give back to you. So again, I think it's important not to allow others to do the branding in your name. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be affiliated with certain groups of people, and I stand by that. Now, I can disagree with someone, but if you're kind of like a cool person, and we might disagree, that's fine, as long as you're somewhat respectful, and you're like, hey, listen, you do your thing, I'm gonna do my thing. You don't touch me, I don't touch you. That's it. I'm not, as you said, my goal. I'm not a preacher. I don't want to tell people like, go and do this and this and this. I'm just gonna give you my opinions of why I think my opinions are correct, because at the end of the day, I think that's what we all do,
Sure.
and I'm gonna explain why I think in that way. But if you don't want to believe me, you don't have to. At the end of the day, you can just look at your life and my life, and if I'm perfectly happy and sane and whatever, I don't see a need to why I should succumb to your shitty life. Why would you want to listen to someone who you wouldn't want to be like at the end of the day?
Fucking spot on, man. I think a part of this, or a lot of it, I mean, being in 2023 and wanting to be of such a group, on one hand, I understand what might push someone to want to go there, but, whether it's the extreme right or extreme left, whatever, whatever those meanings are, because again, that's a very liquid thing
Convoluted.
anyway. Yeah, it's constantly moving. But I think that, to me, at the very core of it, there's a sign of weakness. And this weakness is, to me, I identify it as someone just wanting to be better than other people, or wanting to be in the right team without having actually done anything, or without having accomplished anything of their own, you know.
Yep.
So simply just because I came out of a semen that grew into a human that's now this color, I am now automatically better, you know. And there are things, you know,
Yep.
and let's not separate that too much, because I do see the value in being proud of
Of
your
course.
heritage
Of
and
course.
who you are and where you
Of
come from.
course.
As
Of
an
course.
Iranian person, that's very important to me. You know, I'm very proud of the history of my country and where I come from. And that doesn't automatically mean that I have to put everyone else down, though. You know what I mean? There's a
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
difference between all of those things, you know, and it's more striving for perfection, for being better, and then constantly working on being the better version of yourself, rather than just saying, okay, I'm entitled to being better than everyone else, so now I'm just going to join this group which validates that, or I'll read, I'll only see the pattern which suits my own agenda in life. Does
Yeah.
that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, as kind of as you mentioned, nothing is really black and white. I understand people are tribal in nature. We and this isn't necessarily bad. I know like tribalism gets a bad rap nowadays, and albeit for oftentimes for good reasons. But at the end of the day, trying to abolish tribalism is just means like trying to embrace individualism, which I think at the end of the day doesn't suit the average person because we're pack animals. We require to be among our own. So that isn't necessarily bad. The issue is again in what tribal structure you're a part of. If you build a tribal structure, let's say that is based on strength, maybe like making like healthy life choices, maybe pursuing something greater. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. But if you enter a tribal structure where you're basically just gonna hear the things you already agree with, that can be extremely problematic. And another thing is, I think people and I think once people start understanding this, they will actually shift to it. It'll sound much more rational, and that is, you don't necessarily have to agree with everything your side supports, and you don't have to necessarily disagree with everything your opposition's uh, supports or doesn't
Sure
support,
thing.
whatever. Uh,
Absolutely.
you don't have to do that. You can just pick and choose. Okay, this seems rational, and this doesn't seem rational, and whatnot. So, for instance, as you said, like with the Nazi and white power dudes, for me, it's kind of questionable for me to say I'm proud to be white because where I am from, and I'm from Serbia, everyone is white. So that isn't much of a differentiating factor. So I understand, for instance, if you're like from the US or now from the UK or whatever, that might be something you're striving for. And again, although it's not something I necessarily identify with, obviously I identify as a white guy, but it's not my biggest form of my biggest form of identity. But also I think it's kind of a little bit too convenient. Like your
Hmm.
biggest pride in life is something you had zero, how should I say, input on. You didn't do
Exactly.
anything to be born white. Like what are you talking about? And also, and this is something that these people do not understand is that is just
Hmm.
because you're white doesn't necessarily mean you're necessarily good. And if we want to go back into this political talk, the majority of the people that are making life a lot harder for all of us are white. I hate to break it to you, and I know some people are gonna say, "But what about the Jews?" Well, yeah, the Jews make up like they make a certain percentage, but at the end of the day, what's the part of the other bigger part of the percentage? It's like white liberal dudes. I'm sorry to say it, but that's the case. And one of the things, again, when you're living like this, like, and we kind of touched on this, but Serbs, I think we're like the second tier or third tier category of like white people. So we aren't necessarily like as good as like let's say a Swede, a German, an English person.
All right.
We aren't also like second tier like maybe I don't know Greeks or what. So we're third tier. So we oftentimes get viewed as like the subhuman form of whites. So and I can tell you something for a fact, and that is you will never see more inherent racism and more inherent, how should I say, xenophobia than from a liberal white person telling you how you should live your life. I mean, we
Yeah.
see this all the time. Instead of it's basically like this in Serbia, we kind of have this this term, and that is colonial overlord mindset, and that's basically, or neo-colonialism mindset. It's basically where the top tier white people dictate how all of the other people should behave, and if you don't behave like that, you're essentially untermensch, so you're kind of subhuman. And that's a very, it's, you can kind of see these patterns that were maybe present, let's say, in the 40s or 30s in Europe, but also like in the late 18th century or whatnot. They haven't went anywhere. The form of the form of, how should I say, intolerance is just completely different. Instead of you being intolerant for my skin color, you're completely intolerant for my views. And we saw
Mm.
that with, for instance, when I'm going to go back to Serbia again at one point, but we had a very insane situation recently, not recently, but like last year, where we were supposed to have like a Euro Pride festival. So it's not just a regular like LGBT festival, but it's supposed to be like a Pride festival where it's kind of like for everyone across Europe. Like imagine it's like Eurovision, but for gays. So it was supposed to
Right.
happen over here, and you have to understand, Serbia is generally speaking an Orthodox country, religious, kind of like more conservative and whatnot.
That was my
And like,
understanding. Yeah.
yeah. No one is hateful. They just have their own views, and they said like basically, listen, like in Serbia there are obviously laws against against sexual discrimination. Like you cannot treat someone badly just because of their racial or sexual or religious preference. That's completely illegal. Like I cannot
Sure.
fire you because you're a homosexual. But
Yeah.
like when what people said was like, no one is preventing you from being a homosexual, but like the values that you are promoting with this festival, it does not align with our current values. And basically, because there was like a lot of tension, the government said, okay, we're simply gonna not allow the festival. We're also not gonna allow the counter festival of the, let's say, more right wing elements of the country. You're both outlawed.
Mhm.
And basically, what ended up happening was that like a U.S. Ambassador came and like the courts actually forbid it. It was actually passed by law. Anti-constitutional, cannot happen. And basically, the U.S. ambassador came and said, no, you're going to have that festival because that's a part of our values. So, and obviously, the
Wow.
festival happened. So you can see how sketchy that is. And kind of one of the things that I really liked was when I was like reading through Twitter, where the said ambassador said also like the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Ireland, and a lot of people said, who are you to interfere into another country's internal policy? And also, especially, and here is the sketchy part, and this is something that more people should do. These people are against their own values, because if you're supposedly democratic and 90% of the country is against something, you cannot tell the 90% of the country they're wrong. That's anti-democratic. So
Yeah.
that's that form of neo-colonial mindset. You cannot just basically tell people what to do, and that's again that's the funny thing, because all these like white power dudes have a lot of things in common with these like anti-white dudes. They're just
Yeah.
views are completely different, but their methods are basically exactly the same. They live in like this bubble where they just repeat whatever they want to hear.
Yeah, the problem is as well is that that divide is inherently being injected into society. Like, for example, that whole chat GPT thing, I mean,
Mhm.
there's neither of these options apply to me personally, but it's still interesting to observe. And it's that if you ask it, is it good to be proud of being a white person, then it will tell
Yeah.
you oh well, you've got no control over that, there's no need to be this and that. And then if you ask it, should I be proud of being a black person, it says yes, of course you should be. And that's fucking strange, man. That's like, it's almost like, that divide needs to exist, in the first place, purely because, it's just a method of divide and conquer. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. Right on, we're back in.
Goddamn AI overlords, shut us down.
That's it, man. They were listening in on the conversation. There's like, hey, you can't have a nuanced fucking conversation that doesn't fit the agenda. What the fuck?
that
You can't
doesn't
be in the
that
middle.
doesn't that doesn't confine with the terms and agreements of ChatGPT and whatever else we're using.
That's it, man. But yeah, that's why I was just saying that it's strange to me that such a thing is even being injected into our world. Even about the whole parade thing that you talk about. On one hand, yes, um, I think it's personally, there's some things I think you gotta be tolerant of, because if you're not, it's only gonna create more problems, And this is something that I've seen firsthand over in Iran.
Yeah,
That I've
yeah.
seen, like when the government tells you can't do this, you can't do that, it only just becomes worse. And I was the example of it in the sense of playing black metal in an Islamic,
Mhm.
heavily Islamic country where it can get you killed. But to me, that was almost like a motivation to do it more, even though if it meant that my life was going to be in danger. But you know, like playing black metal is one thing, but then practicing certain other things, or it can be a very different thing. And when you're talking about, for example, like the the sort of the pride thing that was going to happen, you see that a lot between the US and especially African countries like Uganda, for example,
Mhm. Mhm.
where they actually fully they outlawed the whole LGBT thing, and they were
Mhm.
basically
Mhm.
telling America, hey, if like this is our country, if this means our relations are going to go to shit, then fuck you, we're going to do this anyway. Which to me, that's kind of like, on one hand, you kind of feel sorry for some of the people that live there, but then on the other hand, it's still, that's not the position for the US to be getting in and
Yeah.
teaching them how to run their country and their culture. So it's a very, very strange and difficult kind of situation, where there doesn't seem to be any middle ground. And then on the other hand, you'll see these fucking prides in the US where there's like fucking children involved, and it's like, what the fuck are you people doing there? It's like it
Yeah.
seems
Yeah.
to be slowly drip feeding to normalize. I think the end goal of a lot of this, without seeming too conspiratorial, it almost just seems like it's just trying to normalize pedophilia at the end of the day, which shouldn't have anything to do with it. And I'm not saying that all people who are part of that community are trying to do this. No, absolutely not. There's a lot of people who just want to fucking live their lives, and they just want to be who they want to be and who they think they are. And
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think that's anyone else's business to tell them that. However,
Absolutely.
their whole thing is being used as a tool for something else, is the point I'm trying to get to.
You touched on something really good, and that is the fact that at the end of the day, homosexuals and, let's just say, in especially like with this like transgender thing, like and like gender fluid thing that's happening recently. At the end of the day, no one cares about these people. Let's be real. No one cares about how an average gay person is, what is happening to an average gay person in Uganda. Like that, let's be real here. No one cares about that. Similarly, no one cares about the opinions of a black guy living in, let's say, I don't know, Southside Chicago, and what his experiences in life are. No, they're using that as a front for their brownie points. That's basically going to get them elected, or at the end of the day, have another form of compensation. Because let me give you another example. The best uh the easiest way of seeing like these people change their, like going like on a, like turning 180, is when you see like a representative of a certain oppressed minority being against being portrayed as a victim. And let me give you an example. The media absolutely fucking hates gay dudes who are against pedophilia. Let me remind you, they shut down the pages of the group, gays against
The
groomers.
Gays Against Groomers, yes, I've been
Yeah,
following that page for a while,
yeah.
actually.
Let's give another example, like African Americans or blacks who aren't like very lefty. And like, how dare you step out of your zone of being a victim? Like, and you see that, and I can kind of sympathize a little bit with these people, again, because we're the third generation white people. I know how it feels like to be the underdog. But basically, over here also, we're also always trying to be like presented as if someone has to look over us and whatnot, and like we are incapable of leading our own lives, and that's essentially, and we're not. Like a black guy isn't incapable of leading his own. He doesn't need the Democrats or Republicans for him to tell him what he should do. Like, let's be
Yeah.
real here. Similarly, if you're a gay dude in Serbia, in, I don't know, in Ireland, in Spain, or whatever, like, you don't need the governments to tell you like how you should behave. You already live your life, but at a certain point, your life becomes a part of their political struggle. And that's, I think, unfortunately, that's essentially what's going on. And I think, and this is all to human nature, people aren't necessarily gonna, how should I say, be against power when it's on their side. So for instance, unfortunately, a lot
Yeah.
of gay people aren't gonna be against that simply because they are the favored class. But same thing about maybe about some different races, etc., especially of the racial minority. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, just because you're the favored class currently doesn't mean that you'll be favored in maybe near recent future, because tables can turn pretty rapidly, and you can go from a class of people which is maybe favored to being undesirable rather fast. So you got to eliminate these patterns of behavior like rather fast, and even when they are maybe at your, I should say, um, when they're in your favor.
Yeah, it's the same as the COVID situation, man. People
Yeah.
being like, well, they're asking us to be vaccinated, so we want to be that. So let's just be that. Anyone else, if it costs them anything, well, fuck them. They're not on the right team. As long as I am safe, fuck everyone
Yeah.
else. Who cares? And that's yeah, you're right. That's a very selfish way of thinking that's just inherently self-destructive to us, because I think it's the purest form of divide. Being it's not so much even fighting with other people, but it's rather the indifference towards other people, and just being like, okay, as long as I'm
Yeah.
safe, fuck everyone else, basically. I think that's there's something about that, which I don't know if you want to go into the metaphysical realm of talking about karma and things like that, but I do think
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know if you had the chance to read that book I sent you, man, as a
Yeah, the one
man
you didn't know, I
thinketh.
haven't.
Man, fucking what a brilliant book that is. And it's only from like 1905. And basically, the moral of the story with that book is that, your life and everything that you do is influenced by your thoughts. So, whatever it is that you're thinking, it will be, you will attract the same thing. So, let's say, for
Yeah. Mhm.
example, if you're someone who say owns a business, but then you're trying to be tight and not pay your employees properly, and then be just as tight as possible, you're gonna end up bankrupt, and you're also gonna end up with a poor reputation, and that's like,
Mhm.
that thinking of like, oh, where can I save, and then constantly being obsessed with things like that to the point of mistreating other people will only guide you down the same path, similar to a person who's always paranoid about getting ill and getting sick.
Yeah.
That's the person that's the most likely to get sick. These are the literal examples that are in that book. And I think that is so fucking spot on, because especially if you look at things now in our world and the divide, the societal divide, which we're all experiencing, I think that is
Yeah.
all absolutely relevant.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is the case. People don't want to abolish power once they have the power at their grasp.
Yeah,
Again, it's a very human instinct, unfortunately, but it's something that we got to be conscious about. And that's kind of I'm going to going back to that subject, and that is that you don't have to necessarily agree with everything just because it's on your side, quote unquote. Like there are quite few things which are obviously very wrong that people don't want to that people still support, because kind of these guys support the same thing as I do. I mean, I know the amount of slack that I got when I roasted Andrew Tate, and like all of these like supposed traditionalists who are like family and back to traditional values, and you're literally supporting a sex like what's the name of that, a sex offender who went to like a third world country to exploit the political and moral corruption of, not moral corruption but general corruption of a country.
yeah,
So what? And it's absolutely, and like the amount of people that actually supported him, like I'm perfectly fine with you like saying like, listen, he's innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. That's objectively speaking correct.
of
Like
course, yeah,
he's innocent, but he dry snitched on himself. Like it wasn't taken out of context or anything like that. There was like, it was on his website, on his videos. He literally said, "This is what I do. This is what I got rich." And you have these people, and this is like as diametrically opposed as it could be against their supposed values, and they're supporting him simply because he is their guy. And that's something that people should be more critical about, because essentially you're legitimately turning more into an NPC. Like, you can have an opinion that goes against the box that maybe you fit in the most. And it kind of goes back in that idea of, like, people just want to be with their own crew, and they want to support the things which are going to get them more power, etc., even when it's absolutely, I should say, problematic. That's why I don't believe that the solution towards anything is black and white. I don't believe the solution is like to for these guys to win and these guys to lose. Like, at the end of the day, there has to be just a logical understanding and logical take on a general situation for you to realize what is positive and what is not, instead of like, oh, I'm gonna pick this solution because my guys picked this solution. So it's a childish way. It's a very binary approach.
I agree. I'm actually really glad that you brought him up. I remember when you posted about that, and I think, it's good to pay attention to things like this. It's good to say, oh, well, what does so and so person say? But the problem is, a lot of people, as you sort of alluded to, they don't seem capable, or perhaps just rather willing to, sort of pick and choose their own thoughts and their own opinions, and we're very easily bought into just the wholesale ideologies of things.
Yeah,
Like for
absolutely. Yeah.
example, in the case of this Tate guy, I never really followed him that much to know exactly what it was, but obviously after everything, I kind of became a bit curious, because on one hand, I had people. Like, there was this girl I was talking to, and I can't say I'm really friends with her, but this was someone who was at a at a sort of at an event where I was just talking to, and I'm always curious. I want to know everyone's different perspectives, even if it's completely opposite to mine. I'm always curious as to, well, what does that make you think the way that they do? And she was
Yeah.
saying something like, well, I'm glad he's put away now. That was really terrifying. And I think to myself, well, why? You know what? I obviously didn't ask this in a sort of dismissive way. I was genuinely curious as to, well, why
Yeah.
why are you scared of some guy who's running his mouth on the internet?
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I knew people that would say, oh, he's going against the Matrix, he's gonna bring him down. Of course they've got him, and everything. And it's sort of I was very curious and intrigued by both sides of this coin. The thing, however, that I kind of got to was that, yes, perhaps similar to yourself, I think we reached a similar conclusion. But I was thinking that he's got some of his values are great, spot on. But first of all, he's very much sort of almost like a satirical character,
Yeah, he
and
is.
the whole irony is having someone with a jawline like that preaching masculinity. And you know, but the whole thing is like, see what I just did there. That's like what his whole personality is like. But
Exactly.
the problem is we're all just. I mean, and he's very young. I think he's like probably same age as you and I, if I'm not mistaken.
Tate?
But
No, 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 no. I think he's in his early 40s.
oh, okay, perhaps he is then.
Or,
But,
or
but
maybe in the late or maybe in the late 30s, something like that. Like, he isn't a
okay,
very young guy.
okay, sure, because you and I are very young guys, of course. So the thing is.
I identify as a young person.
Yes, and the thing was, I'm thinking, okay, so some of these values are good. Just like training is good, being respectful is good, learning independence as a man is good. But on one hand, it's like, who do you need? Like, do you really need a person like that to tell you this kind of thing? Are we really that lost that we need someone
Yeah.
like him, who
Yes, we are.
basically got rich off of sex trafficking, to then come out and say, oh yeah, I'm a Muslim now, I'm this and that, respect family tradition? It's very strange to me.
Yeah,
It's
that's the
fucking
most.
bizarre. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
it's.
know.
I love the argument. It was like, he's going against the Matrix. He's saying like based things. Like, he said what, that you should train. Boo fucking who! What a big surprise! And then some people say, well, you don't know how that extreme it extreme something like that is. No, it's not. like every that's like the most now generic thing that you can hear. Like I made an entire post on that, this like idea of like everyone is now a self-help guru, everyone is like a life coach, and everyone is like rehashing the same worn out cliche things, reading Marcus Aurelius and never really understanding anything, just posting like random quotes. Like that's not actual help. That's just like a laundry list of things that you just subscribe to, and that's it. Like it
Mm.
doesn't prove. And he's actually a prime example of something that that I also touched on in one of my posts, and that is that it just needs to look like it's a part of something. It doesn't matter how genuine that is, as long as it has the
Mm.
appearance of something you agree to. That's perfectly fine. So like he is like he's gonna say something, let's say positive, in the form of like, okay, if you're a dude, don't be a bitch. No, very surprising. Like that's very revolutionary. Like we should give him a Nobel
Yeah.
Prize in like science or whatever. And then, but then he's gonna say like he's gonna say another like three more things which are completely oblivious and absolutely autistic beyond belief, in the sense of like, uh, I'm gonna purposely cheat on this girl so she knows who the top dog is. Like, what
That's
narcissistic
fucking
bullshit is that?
yeah.
Like,
That's
like
exactly the kind of thing that I thought, okay, this is where I switch off, cuz it's like on one hand, yeah, let's take it at ground level. Let's say you want to tell other man, "Hey, take responsibility for your life, train." You know what? Even though these are very obvious things, we do have to acknowledge the fact that in modern society, especially the further west you come, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Serbia, but in the UK, that is kind of a thing. Like, you have to have these discussions for people to realize it. You walk on the street
yeah,
and people are in really bad shape, both mentally and physically. And I've having worked in different environments here, I can tell you, like, like those things, whilst to you and I might seem like duh, fucking really obvious things, there are a lot of people in modern society that don't pay attention to that. But where it goes wrong is when it goes from that, like all those things which, like we said before, they're life asserting, and you could consider them a virtue, even though they should be a standard by which every man should live by. But then it gets to the point of, okay, like you said, cheat on a girl just so you can, just so you can show who the top dog is. I think that's fucking disgusting. And I think that does more damage than good. I think that all that does is it creates far more of a divide, because the point of it is that there is obviously some kind of an attack, cultural or societal or even political, on the foundations of what eventually leads to the creation of a family, which we look at that as a burden now. In modern society, you look at a family and you look at that, oh, it's just a burden. Kids are too expensive. Why do you want to settle with someone when you can go on Tinder and fuck all these random girls who don't give a shit about you anyway? And to me, I think that there's an inherent attack on that. So what I would prefer to see is simply just the practice of people, first of all, just finding their own strength and individualism, but then also learning how to coexist together, and at least within a family foundation. And because I to me that's a good thing. Where I come from, that's something that's highly valued and is highly respected, and it's only taken me being 11 years away from my own family and my own home to recognize the value of that, whilst pursuing my own dreams with performing music and things like that. And yeah, it's sad to me that we can't find the middle ground of, yes, it's good to be disciplined, yes, it's good to be this and that, but also just be respectful and not be a fucking prick to everyone, and understand that all of your actions will have consequences, not just for you, but for everyone else in the world involved.
yeah. You touched on something really well, and that's like this the destruction of the family unit. But what I think people fail to understand is that the people like Tate, they aren't pro family, because his antics are anything but pro family. I'm sorry to tell you, but like a little bit of personal stuff, but like I had the privilege of growing up in a really good family. We had certain things that were like because growing up in the 90s in Serbia wasn't the most the easiest thing in the world, but at the end of the day we had like a solid family unit. No matter how much we struggled, I don't know, like financially, or like how our security was maybe threatened, at the end of the day I had a father and mother figure who I could always like return to. Like the idea of a father isn't to talk like imagine if you are, let's say, imagine your dad telling you, watching a video like in his like let's say 40s, because at 40 you're a grown adult. Like you're not a grown adult, you're like a man. Like a fully, you're like half of your life is now approximately, like you're at the half point of your life. And he's not saying, well, if you're gonna control the matrix, you gotta fuck these bitches. Like why would you
Yeah.
that's not like a father figure. And that's not some, and this isn't to say that the entire point of a person is to have a family. Like I understand that there are certain people who
Yeah,
can
of course.
ultimately do more good without a family than with a family. I mean, there is also like this, again, this idea that you don't have to subscribe to absolutely everything, and that is, it doesn't take a lot of how should I say, uh, it doesn't take a genius to foster like a to like create a human being. Let's just say, put it like that. It's quite a few people, it happens rather accidentally. So
Too
it's not
many.
like the peak. Too many, exactly. The peak of human existence isn't for everyone to have a child, but like if let's say for you personally, uh family is something which you find very important, then you don't want to listen to a guy who's built his entire career out of basically exploiting families. Because
Yes.
and that's something people have to understand. At the end of the day, like these girls that were maybe with him, or that he used for like webcam stuff and maybe for OnlyFans and whatnot, don't view them oftentimes as the enemy as much as they are just willingly, not willingly, but like they aren't even maybe oftentimes, how should I say, capable of understanding the repercussions of their actions. Like if a girl at like barely 18 starts like doing nudes, or like doing basically softcore, or sometimes even hardcore porn, like, and what do you think that family is going to do? Sure, now that girl might at the end of the day makes a little bit more money, but in a society like, let's say, Romania or Serbia or Bulgaria, or I don't know, Ukraine, Poland, Russia, whatnot, she's she's basically now written off, in the sense of like that's the only thing she can do now. Now imagine how
Yeah.
she's incapable. Like when she goes to a family dinner or like a family gathering, and the rest of her family, there's a good chance they're going to ostracize her. So you're going to support the guy who practically demolished a single family. And that's if we even exclude the possibility of actually him, which I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, actually, not maybe, I don't know, maybe forcing, but maybe just, let's say, uh, pushing girls into prostitution, or because as far as I understand, it's now kind of a funny thing to say that you're a pimp. Like that's
Mm.
something you're supposed to be proud of, like pushing girls into like selling their bodies, because that's the ultimate appeal of a quote unquote ultimate masculine and traditionalist figure. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not versed into the Islamic culture, but I'm pretty sure for prostitution and for pimping, you get executed. But
I believe so too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Unless you're married, yeah, you're completely fucked. They may as well, like, chop your dick off. But the thing is as well that, the you can look at these kind of public figures, and you can still appreciate some of what they say, but the problem is that
yes,
people can't think enough for themselves, so they take on everything wholesale. So you can look at someone and think, oh, that's a cool thing. Maybe I won't agree with everything this person does, but I'll take this and this and this from them. Oh, you can learn
exactly,
from
exactly.
everyone. There's the saying that everyone in the world is a teacher. Sometimes people will simply teach you by basically showing you what not to do. And
Exactly, exactly.
this can apply to everyone, and it's the same, like for me, it's the same with people like him, because there's still some positives there. If there weren't any positives, he wouldn't be in the position that he is
Yeah,
now.
of course, of
But
course, of
it's
course, of course.
it's all the extra bullshit that goes with it. And then you could say the same thing about a guy like, for example, Liver King, which I still can't believe that people were surprised that he was on steroids. I don't know what fucking world they were living in, but it's the same. You know what? he says is, yeah, go work out, get some sunlight, eat liver. Like, these are things that are really good for you. But then what's the problem is that at the end of the day, it's a form of, capitalizing on people's weaknesses, so
It's a shtick.
it's the shtick. Exactly. It's a shtick. And, like, you can look at all these people, or you can look at Jordan Peterson and be like, okay, well, some of what he says is good. Doesn't mean I have to agree with everything. And you can learn from everyone like this. And I don't understand why we have to just completely write everything off. And it's the same as, I know you call him, I know according to you, they're all snake oil salesmen, which actually I have to agree, many of them are. But say, for example, you look online at people like Paul Saladino, for example.
I can't stand that cunt.
People like him, but the thing is, the way I look at it is, oh yeah, I can see that you're trying to sell your supplements at the end of the day. I can see that perhaps here and here, when you've been doing this diet and eating it every day, you don't look so good after a while. But at the same time, I still see the value in some of those other things that's like, oh, well, I never thought of this before. It's like this battle, for example, between, like, if you want to call it the biohacking community, whatever that means. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but the biohacking community and then the bodybuilding community, where on one hand, the biohackers, you don't see many people in them who are really in good shape. Sometimes they'll have advice that's bullshit, but then sometimes they'll have advice that's really useful, and it doesn't get paid as much attention to. But then on the other hand, you got the sort of the bodybuilding community where it's like, oh yeah, trust the science. They're all super vaccinated, super jacked guys, but then every 5 minutes they're all dying of heart attacks from taking too much Trenbolone and then mixing it up with Pfizer. So it's like there doesn't seem to be much fucking middle ground here. I like the middle ground of being able to say, okay, well, I like what this one says. I'm gonna try it. Say if it's like the cold exposure, because that's something I've started doing, and I feel fucking great because of it. But then on the other hand, I want to I still want to have my carbs, I still want to have this and that, I still want to go with the calories in, calories out. And then it's like you can combine these things. You don't have to just wholesale just follow one path like a fucking sheep. It's your life. You get to choose how you want to fucking live it. And I feel like many people are conditioned to allow freedom into their own mind or into their life and actually use it in a positive and life affirming way.
Well, one thing that I, generally speaking, like to do when it comes to like these public figures is I like to view their entire quote unquote body of work. So let's say in the of entirety of everything they have been doing, and I want to look at it and let's say, has their overall how should I say, work been ultimately positive or ultimately negative? I'm going to give a couple of examples. For Tate, I ultimately believe he was ultimately negative. He might have said, as you said, a few good things here and there, and I can agree with. And like, let's be frank, I make fun of him and whatnot. I don't discredit some of the other things he does. Like, he's obviously intelligent. He's obviously very outspoken and whatnot. I think he may be too outspoken, if you ask me, but whatever. But I ultimately believe that his entire body of work is negative. I think if you take everything that he said, I think you extract more negative than the good things. Now, for someone, let's say like Jordan Peterson, who I used to like quite a lot when I was younger, I think, but then later after he got sick and kind of recovered, I think he kind of shifted into a different. When I look at him, I see a man who's struggling. But basically, I view his entire body of work as ultimately positive. Now, does that mean that I agree with everything Jordan Peterson says? No. Does that mean that I disagree with everything Tate says? Obviously not. So, as you said, but people like to embrace these like overall packages. Like, if I'm like into the biohacking stuff, I'm gonna do this, and if I'm into the bodybuilding stuff, I'm gonna do that. Like, you aren't like a simple line of code. You can be like, you can embrace both things. It doesn't necessarily have to be like one or the other. It's like again, it's not that binary. You can really approach life however you want it. You don't have to join with any particular clique in order to whatever, like follow a specific lifestyle. So it's kind of like this subculture approach to life. It's kind of like when I was younger, there were only very a few types of subcultures that exist, and you're probably like this. Like, you could have got into subculture relating to music, art. Well, this also goes kind of with music and art, kind of go hand in hand. But like maybe sports, Maybe if you're like really into like learning and whatnot, like those like two or three, like you were either into like heavy metal, rap, pop when you were when I was a kid, or like you were like an artsy kid, or you were like a super fucking jock or whatever. But
Like the
now
college
people want,
system in America, basically.
yeah. And I kind of think that was more productive. But now people want to make a subculture absolutely out of everything, which I really don't like. I mean,
Mm.
some of it is actually, I have to say, very, I gotta say, very interesting and kind of very fun to see. Like the subculture of basically few people who are like are gonna lift weights like crazy, and then they're gonna do like all this like cool stuff. I gotta say it's cool because I've never seen that before, so it's happening now. So I guess that's fine. But like, not everything has to be a subculture, and not everything has to be so structured in place. Like if you are into lifting weights or whatnot, like you cannot ever, I don't know, do something that isn't lifting weights. Or if you are into reading, you don't have to be the person who only reads, etc. Like you can mix and match. Like it's not rocket science. You can do really everything. You're a much more complex machine than you would like to, that you would maybe imagine it.
I think a lot of it is because the more we go along, more and more people are struggling with a sense of identity. And
Mm-hmm.
part of this, I think, if I was to have a guess, I would say is brought upon us by, this culture of everyone just wanting to be famous, or the
Mm-hmm.
celebrity culture, basically, like, and being a celebrity, like the fact that we see that as a thing of value is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's only something that feeds into a sense of narcissism. So when your sole purpose
Mm-hmm.
is I just want to be someone that everyone acknowledges and wants, that's a big problem to me. And I feel like people who perhaps grow up having their correct amount of attention, like you, because you can do too much of it as well. But a lot of those people perhaps don't struggle from these things, but it's always, like, who the fuck wants to be an actor, who gets, who has like millions of followers or whatever,
Yeah.
like you can say that's good for the money, but and yes, it is good for the money, but these things, they're not everything. And I think that this loss of identity of or sometimes, I guess, just looking around and seeing how many other people even exist in the world, and sometimes, I guess, for
Yeah.
a lot of humans, even if they don't have a lot going on in their life, I think it's easy to have an imposter syndrome, and or even rather, like you'll have people who they're just a nobody, but then they will act as if they are someone really special and famous and important,
Yeah.
rather than work on something that would get them there. They simply just want to get there without actually having provided the world with anything. And unfortunately, we do live in a culture that sometimes you do actually get rewarded for not really doing much other than just
Yeah.
showing face as well, which is, you know, um, that's unfortunate, especially for the younger generation. I feel sorry for kids. Like, I would hate to be a fucking kid right
Mm-hmm.
now. That would be
Definitely. Yeah.
awful, because yeah, that's the measure that we all go by. It used to be something along the lines of like, oh, you've not got the new Nike shoe. Well, your family's probably shit. Fuck you. But then now it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you haven't got 2 million followers on Instagram. Wow, what a useless, worthless kid you are. Fuck you. It's this very sad, sad fucking situation that we find ourselves in, and I think more and more, it's going to be harder for humans to find a sense and a meaning in the things that they do, and it's going to take a degree of resilience to be able to find value in what you do without letting comparison take away the joys of what you do in your own life, basically.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the worst people to be affected by this are the younger generations. I mean, I sound like a boomer now. I'm like only 26, but like it's a big difference. Like at a certain point, when I was a kid, like someone, this is gonna sound cliche, not cliche, but like it's gonna sound a little bit funny, but like you had like a safe space when you were a kid. You went home, and it's kind of like everything's cool now. But now you have like these periods where like you don't have a cool and or a kind of off limit zone. It's if you're online, and you better be off online, you're kind of always a target, and you're always being affected and whatnot. And that's unfortunate, because obviously when you're like in these developmental years, it can get to your head. Like and it's not like, I think most people don't have a clear comprehending of how bad it can be. But like once you understand a little bit of how the human body works, maybe like the physiology, the hormone function, the fact that your brain hasn't fully developed up until like you're 25 or whatnot, and being like overstimulated and over, how should I say, uh, basically just overstimulated with information and things that you got to worry about, are probably like just like too much for a kid to handle, especially because these kids that are growing up now are going to be the first generations that are going to be exposed to something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a legitimate social media account when I was like 15, 16, something like that. That's when I really started
Yeah.
having a social media account. These kids now, like middle school, 9 years old, and they're already like recording stuff, and like it can get really nasty and really dark really fast. Like things that they can be subjugated to, and things they can see. It's pretty insane. And again, once you understand like how the human body functions and develops like over time, it's a really like you're the most in the most vulnerable period of your life, exposed to the most potentially dangerous things you can imagine. So it's sketchy. I don't know. The future is doesn't seem very bright. We just gotta ride the waves.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But, like you said, we got to ride the waves. But there's one thing that I've heard you say before, and honestly, I couldn't agree more. And perhaps this doesn't have to apply to everyone, but, there is not a problem that you can't make better by not going to the gym, basically. You know,
Yep.
or,
it,
yeah.
it's a rule of life. It's basically how it functions, and I've never seen it not work. I just say not just
Yeah.
on my own example, but on practically every example that I came across.
Yeah, it's one of them things, obviously we've talked about this before, but, when I used to be super overweight, I used to look at it as something like you only do it for, oh, it's just an ego thing. Look at all these people in the gym, and, like they're just there to fucking, massage their own egos, whatever. But then you start doing it and see how fucking good it feels and realize the
Yeah,
value of physical exertion. And then realize that, oh yeah, so there are, obviously it's a physical thing, but 95% of the benefits are all just mental anyway. And yeah, it's wild. It's wild, the difference when you really start going at it, and I'm always an advocate of it on this podcast. So
well, I can only imagine what kind of person I would turn out to be if I never started lifting weights, or like getting into like this physical culture. I don't know. I can't even really even comprehend. Probably a completely different person altogether, because at the end of the day, when I was a kid, I wasn't anything like this. Like completely different. Like not physically, obviously, but that's obviously the case. But I mean, like mentally, like a different, like pretty much 180 degrees in a complete direction of my values. So I don't know, and that's kind of what I touched on. Like being exposed to these like stimulants at a very potent age is very important. The problem is like what stimulants you're going to be exposed to. Is it going to be like TikTok and like Instagram, where the main value is how many followers you have, how many views you have, being if it's on TikTok, being subjugated to like basically softcore porn or whatever. These are all things which are very important. But then if you at a very young age are subjugated to like a positive, how should I say, um, a positive situation and kind of a positive ecosystem around you, and you build a positive ecosystem around you, it can make a complete difference. Because again, I can only I don't know I can only imagine what kind of a person I would be if I never started lifting weights. It changes you completely as a person, and I think I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate of getting kids, like not necessarily in gyms, but like getting people like getting them in tune with their own bodies as fast as possible. at the
Yeah.
earliest age possible. Like you don't necessarily have to give a kid to do like heavy benches or whatnot, but obviously, like if you're a kid, you can't even do that if you would want to. But like just getting them to like do something physical, it's amazing what it does to your mind. Like when you see something which ultimately like in the initial stages seems like impossible to achieve, and then you achieve it and like wow, well, if I did this which was impossible, who's to say that I cannot do something else which also seems impossible, like maybe in a different level. So yeah, it's extremely important.
Absolutely, man. You hit the nail on the head when because you put it as it's about getting your mind in tune with your body, basically,
Yeah.
because that's a legitimate thing. It's like if you've never experienced that, you might not really know what that is, but that is
Mhm.
something that only comes with experience and with time and with discipline and with consistency, and then you realize that, oh yeah, every little part of your body, everything is, it's all connected, and you have access to that. And actually, for me, an extended way, which I've done this recently, is the cold exposure, man. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
ever done that, but holy fuck,
I tried it a few times.
it's a different challenge, man. It's a different challenge
Yeah.
overall because it's like you can. I'll look at it like this. You can build resilience. Let's say for example, you can work on your bench. You know, you can make sure like the form is spot on. You know, your core is engaged. You can focus on the breathing, and then you can progress in that area, and then how much heavier you can lift, and then that's the kind of part that you get to improve on. This to me is like it's a different thing, but it's almost just as rewarding. It's like it's not quite the same as lifting heavier or running faster, but it's like a new challenge where you get to put yourself through absolute hell, but the rewards are fucking unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if you knew, but there's about I think 2.5x increase in dopamine when you've done I think over 3 to 6 minutes
Mhm.
of cold exposure, which is like essentially you've then it's like nature's cocaine. It's fucking
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
wild.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's a different form of stimuli. Like not everything. No, that's why I said like a couple of moments ago that the people need to subjugate themselves to some form of physical, I should say, challenge, because not necessarily everything is going to jive for everyone the same way. Like for instance, if you give a certain people like just to lift weights, it doesn't really do much for them. But like you give someone to fight, to
Yeah.
kickbox, to box, to roll, to wrestle, like they like feel it. So it's like everyone is suited for a different kind of stimuli, and at the end of the day, these are different forms of stimuli: lifting weights, bodybuilding, powerlifting, martial arts, cold exposure, running, hiking. I mean, these are the things like it just reacts to different. How should I say, to a different person? Like some person might like be hexed. I don't know. Some people might like I don't know crowbar. Another person might like I don't know, like unleashed or whatever. So at the end of the day, everyone kind of has something they have to find themselves with. So it's kind of the same thing with physical culture. Some people might just respond better to lifting weights. Some people might respond better to um, martial arts and whatnot. Ideally, you want to try and subjugate yourself or to as many of these forms of stimuli as possible. Now, obviously, you don't have to do everything at the extreme, but just like say you no pun intended, you dip your toes in the water and kind of see how it feels. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, of course. No, I agree, man. Absolutely. And I do think you got to do one thing, sort of like you have to master each thing, you know, and its own accord. And then once you're at a
yeah,
space where you're like, okay, this is okay, then move on to the other thing, you know. I think I actually heard you use this phrase before about a wolf that chases too many rabbits ends up hungry. And
yeah, something like that.
yeah, and I think that's exactly it. But yeah, I agree. But this is the thing. The point of it being that it the conclusion here is just the importance of physical exercise, physical exertion,
Yeah,
and what it does for your mind. Like it organizes your thoughts. You know, you're less distracted, and you're and yeah, the mind's a very placid thing, and you can train it to be better than it is. You know what? I gotta fucking tell you this. Actually, this is pretty funny. Um, I had my very first compliment after, so I've been training, what, 5 years now? Not a very long time, although I do like to think that I've done a lot in that time. And some of that now I have to thank you for as well. But, I had my first compliment, which was,
Are you on steroids?
Yes.
The best form of compliments.
It
People
is.
tell
It
you that
is.
like yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I mean, if I was, I would want a fucking refund for them. But thank you, I guess. But yeah, that's an interesting one.
It's like an achievement,
Yeah.
something you mount
Yeah.
on a wall.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm guessing you're still in the natty realm yourself.
Of
Any
course,
plan
yeah.
any plans of switching anytime soon? Any
Uh, Potentially,
temptations?
yeah. But temptations are always present. I have my demons and all of my sides. Like, do it, pin. But no, jokes aside, I've been lifting for 9 years now. Next year in
Right.
September, I think it's going to be the 10th year mark. I
Great.
don't know. I'm potentially thinking on the 10th year mark of transitioning to the dark side. But
Oh wow.
yeah,
Shit.
I'm thinking about it. Still have to. But I'm gonna do it for a completely different reason than most people do it. I don't plan. And like, I can't believe I have to say this, but like, this isn't medical advice. Don't pin stuff in your right glute without consulting a doctor. But yeah, anyways, I'm not. My goal isn't basically to cycle. I don't want to. I'm not interested in like running cycles and trying to get as big as possible. Like, no, that isn't what I'm into. I just want to be enhanced. I want to be enhanced because of the simple reason that I want to lift weights, build muscle, build a little bit more muscle, get a little bit more stronger, while also simultaneously doing BJJ and Muay Thai eventually. So I want to be like, that's my thing. Like, I just want to be complete. I've been doing that okay for now, but like, I feel like I've now reached a point where if I do a little bit too much, it's very clear, and I also cannot go full throttle and everything as I would like. Obviously, now gear isn't going to be the magic juice, magic juice, for me to allow me to just train like a lunatic, but it will allow me to train more and recover more. So that's something that I inevitably want to do. And no matter how absurd that seems to my buddy, who's like, "You want to take steroids so you can train more?" Like, what a fucking imbecile. But
Well,
yeah,
the thing is that that's what they do anyway. All steroids
yeah.
do is they just allow you to recover faster, basically, so you can train more and then pack on more muscle. Obviously, it'll have some other effects on just
Mhm.
it's testosterone, so it'll obviously help with fat loss and things like that as well. But the thing is, there's a beauty in this. See, like, you're probably more of a rare case because you said you've just gone 10 years, and you're only just now thinking of doing it, and you don't have to
Mhm.
do that, but it's your personal
Mhm.
choice to do it. And obviously you acknowledge and accept the fact that yes, there's going to be some risks involved with doing that as well. I know an Iranian bodybuilder, actually. He was in like the classic physique in Mr. Olympia, Arash Rahbar, Iranian guy.
Yeah, I
Incredible.
followed him.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, fucking what, really, really nice looking physique and everything. But he didn't take any gear until like about what, maybe 20 years into bodybuilding. And everything up until that point is just like solid mass that he's put on through his own hard work. And for me, I mean, maybe I'll change my mind at some point in the future, but for me, at the end of the day, my priority personally is to just be healthy, know that I'm
Yeah.
strong, and if a situation arises, I can handle myself, but also to be able to put on the best performance that I can with my band Trivax. So that's
Yeah.
kind of that's my personal priority. So for me, there's not that much reason to go on anything other than maybe like some TRT or something when I'm older. But I think it's one of them things. So many people, when they're beginners, like you get teenagers who are like 18 years old and they've been lifting for four
Mm.
months. They still got shitty form. They still haven't figured out their sleep. They still haven't figured out their diet, and then they'll go on gear, and then it's so futile, that approach, to me, and it's mostly, I think, a sign of lack of education, and and I think it's very
Yeah,
unfortunate that people do that, actually.
yeah, it's actually that's exactly what it is. Lack of education. One of the reasons why I've not taken steroids for this period of time was because I know what they do, and I know what they can do to you if you aren't careful. I mean, I had a couple of clients who ask me like, should I take this, should I take that, and it's like mostly like these new things like peptides, arms, and whatnot. And I tell them like, listen, have do you understand the repercussions that you're gonna subjugate your body to? Do you know, for instance, let's say a certain peptide, that it's like a growth hormone analog. Now, so for a person who for a layman who doesn't know what that means, like, growth hormone, that means I'm gonna grow more muscle, But no. First of all, like most people don't know that growth hormone, uh, basically when growth hormone is broken down in the liver, it gets converted to IGF-1, insulin like growth factor 1. The problem with the IGF-1 is that although it has an affinity to bind to muscle cells which have been subjugated to mechanical damage, it binds to all cells. So that means it binds to your heart, it binds to your kidneys, it binds to your feet, to your nose, and God forbid you have something in your body growing which isn't supposed to be there, it will bind to that too. So it can fucking kill you,
Right.
or it can at least exacerbate that. Second of all, something that GH also does is, like outside of like uh, left ventricular hypertrophy, which is basically the thickening of the left ventricle, which can again also kill you. GH can also make you insulin resistant. Do you want to become diabetic?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you want? Have you answered that question? Like, third thing, without testosterone, even if you create hyperplasia, that is the creation of new muscle cells, those cells aren't gonna grow without testosterone making them grow bigger. Like that doesn't. So you have these, and this is just like one speckle of a compound that I just touched on. Now there are like 50, 60 of these. So,
Mm.
do you know the background of all of these compounds? Do you know how to handle the side effects? Are you willing, if the answer is yes to all of those, to reap all of the things that come with it, the good and the bad? Because at the end of the day, if you tell this to a 19-year-old kid, do you want to have the possibility of your dick never working again in your life?
Yeah.
Do you think they would touch gear? I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but there is a possibility for that to happen, and the
It's pretty
possibility
common,
might
I
not be.
think.
Depends what you take,
Yeah.
depends how long you were exposed to it, depends how your body reacts, but there is a possibility. Like
Yeah.
that possibility doesn't exist if you train naturally. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
exist. Like that's never going to happen. Like if you bodybuild naturally, nothing bad can happen to you. Not one
Mm.
single thing can happen to you, that you wouldn't want happening to you. When you bodybuild enhanced, now we're talking, because sure there are a lot of
Mm.
benefits, but boy oh boy, are there a lot of negatives.
I had a friend of
And
mine
once you
who, yeah, I had a friend of mine who used to do classic physique. Actually, I don't think he ever really got too far with it, and I don't know if he's still doing it now or not. But I remember talking to him, and he was like, "Yeah, bro, I've got a new coach, and then now I'm gonna be training and stuff." And he did look pretty good, very sort of slim waist, quite shredded and everything, and he was just prepping for his show. And I was like, all right, cool, so what are you doing? And then what's the coach telling you? So it was like, yeah, so I'm doing this and that, I'm on this many calories, and the coaches told me to take some Trembolone, some Anavar, some Test, some D-ball. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, obviously I already knew this, but like, I'm vaguely familiar with the effects of all of these. I'm particularly
Mhm,
familiar with the side effects of Trembolone, because it's like you hear from a lot
mhm.
of bodybuilding guys, who always break up with their girlfriends whenever they're prepping.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then because obviously tempers and shit. And and then I asked him. I said, "Oh, so what does this one do? Why are you taking this one?" And he was like, "I don't know, bro. My coach just told me to take it, so I'm taking it." And I was like, "Listen, man, have you even done your blood work?" It's like, No, I don't. Can you do that for free here, or what can you do? And I'm like, oh my god, you are. This is a ticking time bomb, man. What the fuck are you doing to yourself? But what you don't realize is a lot of bodybuilders, unfortunately, do actually take that path, and it's scary. It's like, fuck, what are you doing to yourself? Just to look good for like a short period of time, you're basically fucking up your whole life and your entire hormone structure.
It's Darwin's theory in full effect. They're essentially removing themselves from the gene pool, uh, quite literally, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, it- I mean, it's insane. I think I'm not the person who's gonna fearmonger people when it comes to steroids, but I mean, there should be a good amount of, no, I wouldn't want to say fear, but you should second guess if that's the decision you want to make, because also this is another thing most people don't understand. For a lot of people, like you have to, when you start taking gear, there are two options. Number one, you either take gear for the rest of your life. Number two, you get off gear and you understand that you will never be as good as you once were. Like you might get okay, you might get to like 80% as you were. And when I say 80% back, I mean like hormonal production, muscle mass production, strength, and whatnot. And I'm not saying like 80% of what you ever achieved with gear. No. I'm saying 80% of what you ever achieved naturally. So
Yeah.
you will never even look as good as you did naturally. Like you have like these two options: stay on gear for the rest of your life, or two, be slightly worse than you could have been naturally. That's
You
it.
can look at it a little bit like nicotine. Like once you start, and then once your body stops its own production, then you're basically dependent on it forever.
That's what I'm saying. So it's a sketchy subject. I don't think people understand the repercussions of it all that well. And if they did, I think they would second guess quite a few of their actions. Again, it's not a, do not touch anything until you're 25. Like that's something I tell people. Like do not touch anything until you're 25. At least let your brain grow, because like you can attest to this. Like what kind of a person you were 3 years ago. That's kind of what kind of a person you were 8 years ago, and what kind of person you were 10 years ago. Like 3 years ago, you're probably much different than you are now. Sure, the
Totally.
fundamentals were there, but like only now you're truly becoming shy. Like
Yeah,
over
yeah.
there, like you were maybe an S and an H, but now you are truly who you are. Now imagine if you took something that would radically change the structure of your personality and your brain chemistry and your hormonal panel and who you are as a person
Yep.
at 19. It's not worth it.
You know, you are absolutely spot on. I think that is invaluable advice, you know. And, well, here's the thing. I've never done steroids, never touched it, but there was something that I did when I was 19, and that was a lot of psychedelics.
A
And,
lot of cocaine.
well, yeah, cocaine too. I didn't get into that until maybe a year later. So, yeah, that was kind of my thing. You know, I did a lot of acid, mushrooms, and DMT in a short space of time, which just totally like rewired my brain in some
Average Joe
sense.
Rogan enjoyer.
Like everything makes sense now, you know. But you know, it's
Yeah.
like who I've turned into. But the thing is, had I not had the discipline and had I not had the positive upbringing, which I really did, you know, like the society surrounding me might have sucked in some ways, but my family were fucking solid. You know, I come from
Yeah, man.
really good parents as far as I'm concerned. And I think if I didn't have any of that, and if I didn't have some of that inherent discipline built in me, I would have been completely fucked. Because like for when I did my first series of like acid and mushrooms, you know, I would walk on the street and I would look at the leaves of the trees, and they would keep on expanding and keep expanding into the sky. And I had that. It's called HPPD. I had it for at least 6 months, and I couldn't look at the light of cars
Mhm.
and things like that. And it was totally, it was really overwhelming. Actually, I thought that I'd gone completely crazy. But then what I did was, I think on my 20th birthday, pretty much from there on until about a year or two later, I switched the psychedelics with alcohol, cocaine, and sex, basically. And then that kind of like changed everything, you know. So I went down that
So
lifestyle.
basically, the rock star lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. And that was like, that was bad in a different way. But obviously, like you learn, like
Yeah.
because they're all like kind of good, like in a very strange way. I wouldn't change anything
That's
because it's
that's
all
why
made
people
with.
do them. That's why people
Yeah,
have a lot of sex, drugs, and alcohol, because it tastes amazing.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. But it's all the way I look at it now is I look at it as unearned dopamine. That's what I look at cocaine as. Like, and it's something that's expensive. You've not done anything difficult. You've not done anything physically difficult to earn it. It's the same as when you have a donut, because the sugar just gives you that massive fucking dopamine response. But you haven't done anything. You haven't done anything
yeah.
inherently survival yeah, that's built in your survival mode to unlock that, to earn that, and if you just keep giving yourself that dopamine, you just end up becoming weak. If you keep watching porn, you end up becoming weak, and that's the thing that I've learned out of all of it is to um, inject your own life with difficulty that you
I,
can
I
overcome,
like how
and
you
that
said inject.
inject. Yeah, exactly. And and I think we need that. We as humans, we need difficulty to survive and get better. And obviously this is a bit of a tangent to psychedelics because they're their own thing and they can definitely have a lot of positives as far as I'm concerned. But
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, personally, for me, this is a little bit of an interesting piece of trivia, because people always ask me like, "Hey, are you straight edge?" Because I don't drink and do drugs and whatnot, and I always have to say no, but kind of yes as well, because no, in the sense of like I don't go with that subculture, but yes, because I suppose I live that lifestyle. But a little bit of an interesting piece of trivia for me: I've actually never touched a single narcotic in my life, not even weed. Ever since, even before I started lifting weights, I always hated junkies. Like, and you want to hear an even bigger piece of trivia? Because over here, like, we don't really have meth or whatever. So the junkies that I hated the most were potheads. Like even I hated them more than I kind of still probably do, than the people who used to pull rails of coke and speed. But that's another story for even on in and of itself. I had a bit of my own, how should I say, background of things that I wasn't maybe I wouldn't want to say I wasn't proud of, but that I did weren't which weren't I should say all that positive. But one of the things that I actually said to my body quite recently, and that is that I believe at a certain point, as a young person, you have to experience things in life which aren't maybe always going to be extremely positive, simply
Yeah.
because at that point you have answered the question of what would happen if I did this, because you don't ever want to come to a position where you're in your late 30s or 40s or whatnot, and now because you never experienced all of these joys, quote unquote, that maybe younger people do, you want to now experience in your late 30s and 40s. I mean, for instance, you see you have this example with people who are, let's say, uh, they have one partner all of their life, and that might
Mm.
sound sweet and kind of innocent and kind of it sounds cute and whatnot, but and it might work for some people, but what I have seen oftentimes is that these people haven't lived their life. And then when they reach a certain point, they're like, oh, like, well, maybe then they basically go off the rails and do a million of other things they shouldn't be doing, simply because they never had that experience when they were younger. So I oftentimes say, when, well, like, because this question gets often brought up, like, oh, what do you think about
Mm.
like celibacy or like abstinence or whatnot, like no fap and like, sorry for being crass, but like not chasing pussy. It's like, I always tell people, listen, I'm gonna be a little bit of I suppose it's like a misogynistic thing to say, but it depends if you're a guy or if you're a girl. Because
Mm.
if you're a guy, I think you need a little bit of experience. Because here is the thing: if a girl doesn't have a lot of experience, no guy is gonna, like, most guys don't have a problem with that. But if a guy doesn't have experience, quite a few girls are gonna have a problem with that, and it's gonna seem awkward. So when I tell people, like, listen, it's better to be a little bit degenerate like when you were a kid, and just experiment and see what works and what doesn't, and see what you're into, simply so you can get that out of the way when you get a
Mm.
little bit older. So now you kind of know, you don't have to think about, okay, maybe I should have done this or maybe I shouldn't have done this, because now you have the experience. For instance, I was never into drugs, but used to drink like a kid or whatnot, and I had my fair share of experiences with women. So now that I'm in a relationship for like 3 years, and I don't have to think about cheating on my girlfriend or looking at other girls, simply because I kind of
Yeah.
did everything that I wanted to do. Like
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
rules on sex, my rules on sex is like, don't touch kids, uh, make it private, no other dudes, and like, I don't know, maybe a few things here and there. So once you tick all of these boxes off, and like, don't go to jail, and don't catch an STD if possible. But once you
That's
do all of that
important.
when you're a kid, very important. Like, and once you do that when you're a little bit younger, and when it's a bit more, how should I say, socially acceptable, you don't have to do that when you're a little bit older. You never want to be the guy in his like late 40s trying to hook up with a girl. That sounds, or like in his 50s. That's so sad, and like, so like, you
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
found anyone in like 40, 50 years of existence. Like, that's so bad. Like, don't do that. Like, just don't do that. Like, live your life at a certain point when you're a younger guy, have some experience, see what you like, see what you don't like, then like chill out a little bit and just kind of go on a path that makes sense.
Actually, you know what? This is, and you gotta realize the conversation you and I are having now, in the fashion that we're talking about it. This is not a common thing in today's world and society, because everyone's like, "Oh yeah, do whatever you want, everything goes,
Yeah.
fuck it, whatever." And but you know what? I pretty much agree with you on all of those points. I think on one hand as well, I wouldn't say just do something for the sake of it. Like, for example, when you say, you look at someone who's been with the same person their whole life, what matters is, as far as I'm concerned, is that because it's out of loyalty and respect and a mutual interest, or is it simply just fear of discomfort, of losing
Or
that
because
that
they
that
don't have any other
space?
options.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think and the thing is as well, like with humans, it's a complicated thing if you want to talk about a relationship, because it's like each person, they've got their own unique fingerprint. Now you
Mhm.
apply the relationship of two people, that's even more unique in itself. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
like that'll never be the same. It's never something you can just
Yeah.
replace.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is that, and I think sometimes, unfortunately, people get too fixated on that. But also, I also think, I mean, I do consider myself a spiritual person, and from that side of things, I can say that when you do form that bond with someone, even if it's on their totally sort of basic and surface level environments, there is a connection that does get formed with that other person. Even if
Yeah.
you want to put it down to a completely scientific level of, oh, it's just oxytocin. Okay, no, let's just call it that then. But when that happens, that's not something you can replace. So I think it matters what you also think of that person, because it's almost like you've got a part of them attached to you forever.
Mhm.
And this, I do agree that as a guy you need experience,
Mhm.
100%. And I actually think that's preferable. You want to, I know it perhaps might be a bit of a childish or of an example, but it's the thing of like a key that opens different locks is a good key, and a lock that gets opened by all the keys is a shitty lock. So I do, it's a
We don't make the rules.
yeah. Exactly. But at the same time, I do think that this is something that applies to everyone. So that's why I think it's important who you wanna share that with. And it's something
Unfor-
that no one else can tell you how to do it right, other than
yeah. Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think people view, and I think I heard you saying this, which was a brilliant approach. I never heard anyone say that, but like the fast food approach to relationships,
Mm.
and it's really like that because people just view other people as replaceable, and that's not the case. Like, there is more. A person is a person. He's not just like a number. He isn't like a name and like, I don't know, a body.
Yeah.
By inevitably, that kind of approach to like relationships, both romantic and like platonic, are anti-human at best, because you
Yeah.
basically denoted a person to like a certain characteristic and not who he actually is as a human. And that's kind of one of the things which made me question some of my choices when I was younger. Basically, to the point was like I realized that my actions were kind of pointless because, like, what do I gain from this? Like, sure, you get pleasure from that stint, but at the end of the day, you don't get anything more to that. And I think ultimately that's why. And I think it's kind of like I almost view this. I almost view this need for, how should I say, this fast food approach to relationships as the people's approach to nutrition, in the sense of like we all have our needs and desires. We have a need to love and to be loved and to have intercourse and to spend time with another person, like we have a need to eat and feel satiated and feel nutritious. But at the end of the day, when you take this fast food approach to nutrition, you fast food approach to relationships, you don't at the end of the day worry about the quality of the calories. You just worry about getting full.
Yeah.
Like with McDonald's, whatever, you're just interested in like just getting some food down. And similarly, when you're talking about people, you're just interested in hooking up with the next person. But at the end of the day, that person might just fulfill a basic need, a very primitive need that's very surface and shallow, but it won't actually fulfill your real requirements. Like McDonald's won't fulfill your real requirements for nutrition. So it's inevitably that's how you want to look at it. Yes, you should absolutely look at people the way you look at nutrition and calories. Coach
Fuck
Darko,
yes.
AOC 2023.
Yes. Awesome, man. And I think on that note, we can probably wrap this up. What a fucking blast it's
Yeah,
been.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for jumping on, man. Fucking it's good to have this conversation with you. Do you want to quickly just let people know what you got going on, what they can keep an eye out for?
uh, I hope actually, like I've been a little bit stagnant with. I hate this word, but I've been stagnant with content recently because I had quite a few things on my plate to do and like fix up and whatnot. But hopefully things are gonna continue as they were up until recently. I like one of the things that I want to do is like just I like to cover topics which maybe are seem, how should I say, very obvious, but then when you touch on them, they uh, how should I say, it gives a different perspective. So I always joke around when people call me an influencer just because I'm a coach who just doesn't talk about fitness and whatnot. But like, I guess how dare I step out of my lane? But yeah, I plan on doing definitely more of this kind of stuff, talking about these like social problems and whatnot and things that, in my views on how everything has been working. Outside of that, Legionware is we're currently working with Legionware to put out some new stuff, a really big summer launch. And outside of that, we just got to ride the waves. We got to bench more, we got to squat more, deadlift more, build more muscle, listen to more music. So we just gotta be life assertive.
Fuck yeah, man. Awesome. And obviously, yeah, so I'll link everyone to everything you got going on with Legionware, with your socials, and obviously, if they want to get in touch with you about some coaching, you still got a few spots
Mm-hmm.
left at the moment, right?
Yeah. Things are always changing and shifting. One day you're full, another day you have a few spots. So yeah, you can always message me at my Instagram or my email. So anabolicoutloudcoaching at gmail.com, and that's really it.
Awesome, man. Well, Darko, brother, thank you so fucking much for coming back on the podcast. It's been a blast having this conversation with you. I feel like you're still gonna have to come back again for a third round at some point in the future. So yeah, if yeah, we'll do the next one during the World War lockdowns. How does that sound?
Well, the first test run of the lockdowns completed successfully. So now we're probably that was a trial or the initiation phase. So when the real
Yeah.
deal, when the full version is released, it's gonna be a blast. No pun intended.
There we go, man. There we go. Fuck yeah. Awesome. Cheers, brother. Appreciate it. And to everyone else listening to the podcast, go and check out Darko's work. We hope you enjoyed this one. See you on the next episode. Cheers. Boom.